It seems as though time has stood still at the Souk al-Hamidiyah, a large bazaar in the old town of Damascus. Syrian traders have been selling perfume and spices here for centuries. But once I get deeper into the bazaar, I realize the shelves are laden with cheap imports from Asia.
Four years have passed since Syria started to leave the path of a planned economy and started to open its markets to foreign imports. I want to know how this change has affected the country.
In one of the capital's rich neighborhoods, I meet Ali Katrib. The 21-year-old student is shopping with his family. He remembers that just a few years ago, this would not have been possible. Just like in the former East Germany, nearly everything was state-owned. Ali determines that these shoes were made in Turkey. I'm curious to know what it's like to leave behind a socialist planned economy.
Every day there's a new shop, there's a new restaurant, a new cafe. And although there's some governmental process to rely more on products are made here, even the goods are made here, but people still prefer what's coming from outside.
Whether designer jeans or cheap products, nearly everything is available, and people with money in Syria can show it off. But even Ali is having difficulty adjusting to the concept of competition determining prices. Oranges can cost 1/3 more in a rich neighborhood than in the old town. Ali says that's no problem for him, but it is for the majority of Syrians.
Every day there's a new prices. That's one of it for people. That's one of the stories you hear everywhere, wherever you go. But, oh, that was 100 yesterday. Today is 120. Oh, what a steal.
But Syria hasn't discarded socialism completely. Imad al-Asal, director of the State Consumer Protection Agency, takes me on one of his trips to the market. I'm surprised to learn that food is inspected more often in Syria than in Germany. And it's not only about testing the quality. Imad tells me that they look at prices and check whether they're clearly posted for customers to see. Customers should first decide if they can afford the products, so that things don't get awkward afterwards. He says his office analyzes production costs, adds up the profits, and then determines the price, depending on where the product is sold. The next stop for the inspectors is a large bakery. In order to keep bread prices low, the new privately owned bakeries are also being heavily subsidized. So Imad al-Asal doesn't just check the quality of the state-produced flour. He also makes sure it's actually used in bread and not in other products that end up on the free market. Imad says that this subsidized product, Syrian flour, is a kind of indirect social aid from the state for the consumer. He thinks it's better than if people just get cash handouts from the government. But the Syrian government can't afford to pay subsidies indefinitely. I'm told that the country's most important source of income is running out: oil. I take a taxi to the Syrian Chamber of Commerce. Signs of change are everywhere. But I have the feeling that it's like traffic in the capital. It's not going very fast. A wave of privatization like that after German unification is not allowed, which Mohammed Ghassan Al-Kalla, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, thinks is a good thing.
Most welcome.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
نحن يجب
كما ذكرت في البداية أن نعيش مرحلة
He says the country is in a situation where it must first get used to a social market economy,
اقتصاد السوق الاجتماعي
that it has to learn to live with it
بالتطور
and to develop with it.
ونؤهل أنفسنا للتعايش مع هذا النظام جميعا.
The next day I travel to the outskirts of Damascus. Mazen al-Masalki, head of a small shoe factory, knows what it means to learn to live with a market economy. Syria's opening of its markets made thousands of workers in the shoe and textile industries unemployed. Because there are very few large manufacturing companies in the country, it's mostly family-run businesses that have to compete in terms of price and quality with goods from the rest of the world. Mazen al-Masalki tells me that manufacturers are nervous. Some have shut down and become retailers who now import products they used to make themselves. Others simply can't give up businesses handed down through the generations and try to survive. Back in the old town, I meet with the head of the Damascus office of the GTZ, a German government development agency. Magdi Menshawi explains that subsidies for diesel fuel were drastically cut last year. The fuel, which powers everything in the country, has become almost twice as expensive. He says that when the price was raised and the subsidies cut, there wasn't nearly the degree of dissatisfaction among the population that had been expected and feared. He says that was because large parts of the population had been involved in the discussion. And he adds that he hopes that will be the case for all other important decisions regarding economic reforms. And indeed, the economic reforms are the main topic of discussion among Syrians. On my last evening, I visit a popular student bar. No one here wants to talk to me about other possible topics, such as corruption or the Syrian police and surveillance state. But economics and the job market are discussed openly, and controversial opinions are voiced.
We're starting to see private universities and private schools open up, and they're teaching banking and finance, which are the new industries opening up in Syria. But there's still a lack. There's a lack of availability of qualified labor for the private sector.
They just opened in Syria. Suddenly, we had some new legal change about the private banks, for example. They opened, and suddenly they needed a new employee, and people weren't ready.
I think more people in here are afraid to go for the private companies, because in government companies you can have like health insurance or stuff, but not a lot of money. The salaries are like very low.
The traditional Syria is slowly getting a more modern face. And my impression is that there's no turning back from this path of economic openness.